Hello everyone, my name's Lawrence Hugo. I'm the Director of Credit Mediation Service. We're specialised debt negotiators. We assist companies and individuals experiencing financial hardship. And our aim is to partially or wholly waive debts through negotiations. A question that keeps popping up, certainly in the last 20 years we've been operating, plus a question that keeps popping up is what's the difference between bankruptcy and debt negotiations? Why not just apply for bankruptcy as opposed to bother with negotiations? It's a really good question, so I thought I'd address that today in this clip. Firstly, if you are considering bankruptcy, there's two websites you've got to visit. The first is ASFA, the Australian Financial Securities Authority, and it gives a host of information on the pros and cons on bankruptcy, so that's a really good website to visit. And the second, particularly if you're a consumer, is the Money Smart website, which equally gives all kinds of information on there on what your options are if you're experiencing financial hardship. So, and the other thing is, this is not legal advice or financial advice, very important to note. So what are your options? Bankruptcy, with the bankruptcy and with debt negotiations, what are the pros and cons in your options? So with bankruptcy, obviously there's going to be a bankruptcy listing on your credit report, and that'll stay there for 5 years and then will drop off. The bankruptcy term, and often people get this mixed up, the bankruptcy term is 3 years. So you serve out your term of 3 years in bankruptcy, abiding by the conditions of the bankruptcy rules, but the default or the bankruptcy listings on your credit report for 5 years. So you serve your term for 3 years, and then it's over. You can now normalise your financial affairs. From time to time, ASFA might decide to extend that 3 years, but that's certainly case by case depending on the idiosyncrasies of your estate. So you get a dirty great big bankruptcy listing on your credit report, and you're bankrupt for 3 years. And through that term, you've got to abide by these rules. Now, some of these rules, for example, your income is means tested, and if you earn a certain amount of money, then you've got to contribute to the estate. A good portion of those people who apply for bankruptcy don't need to contribute anything because they've got a number of kids and they're on fairly average income, and they're in a blessed position where they don't necessarily have to contribute to the estate from their income. That's not always the case, of course, but it's always case by case with bankruptcy, because every individual person's scenario is different. Then it impacts your assets, and so if you have a family home, it's important to consider that may be affected. An inheritance that potentially might come your way within that 3 years, and other assets, and so that's certainly a very important factor to consider. Another big one for people is travel. You're not allowed to travel overseas whilst you're a bankrupt without permission. So that doesn't mean that you're not allowed to travel overseas. You can, but you've got to seek permission from ASFA to travel overseas. And this is to stop individuals from, going to the Cayman Islands to check out their bank accounts and operate businesses overseas. And that's obviously not relevant for the average Joe Lunchbox, who's in a bit of financial trouble with their credit cards. That notwithstanding, if you are a bankrupt, you need to go overseas for, say, a funeral or a holiday or some other event, then you've got to seek permission from ASFA. And it may well that they'll approve and let you go, so that hopefully wouldn't be a problem. But it's more complicated in traveling overseas if you are considering bankruptcy. The positive side of bankruptcy is, well, it's over. If you tick all the boxes in terms of it doesn't affect your life. For example, if your credit report looks like a Christmas tree already, a bankruptcy listing will just kind of top it off, and who cares? Okay, that's fine. If you are on a low income or average income and you have kids, you'll pass the means test potentially. You may not need to contribute to the estate. That's okay, and you get your debts waived. So everybody wins, so that's great, and so that might well be a positive outcome. So that's that's the considerations or the major points on bankruptcy. If you are considering bankruptcy, please speak to a specialist, a bankruptcy specialist, to talk about the ins and outs that would reflect your personal circumstances, and visit the ASFA website. You compare that to debt negotiations, and debt negotiations is very, very different, with the same or potentially better results than bankruptcy. So with debt negotiations, you're employing a professional negotiator who will use your idiosyncrasies, your profile, to leverage a better deal. It won't impact your credit report in a negative way, so there won't be any arrears events on your credit report, and there won't be any defaults in your credit report, ideally, when you're using a debt negotiator. The costs can be the same or less, depending, again, it depends on the circumstances, and the job is done fairly quick, and so you can get the job done anywhere between a week to upwards of a month, month and a half. Sometimes it can go longer for complicated circumstances, but generally you can have this all wound up within a month, month and a half, and you're then debt free. So a negotiator will approach all your creditors, reduce your, for example, you owe $100,000, they'll potentially would reduce it down to say $30,000, for example. You pay the $30,000 out or pay it off, and after that you're debt free and your credit report is clean. So whichever way you look at that, it's a very good deal, and it's a much better alternative. With some exceptions, it's a much better alternative than bankruptcy. So if you have any questions around debt negotiations, please feel free to reach out to us, w.creditmediation.com.au. Thanks guys, and we'll talk again soon. Bye.